What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA show. And today we are talking about this crazy video with Kevin Iole at the press conference after Dana White's Contender Series that everybody's talking about involving Jon Jones. So I'm going to play a little bit of this in case you haven't seen it. You probably have by now. Everybody's talking about it. And then I want to give my thoughts. So just as a quick summary, we're at the press conference. Somebody brings up Jon Jones and kind of trolling Dana White saying, oh, it's Jon Jones, the greatest of all time, blah, blah. And this is Dana White's response. Then we're going to see Kevin Iole chime in. I'm not going to play all the interaction, but I want to give you my thoughts because I think everybody is applauding Kevin Iole. I am too. I think it's amazing. But I also want to talk about why this isn't such a cut and dry issue and defend Dana White a little bit as well in terms of what he was saying.
Is Jon Jones the pound for pound GOAT?
He's the pound for pound best fighter in the world, and he's the GOAT. And you all know this.
So you can see the people in the audience or in the room, the other journalists are kind of laughing because everybody knows Dana White's been getting trolled pretty hard over him sticking to this notion that Jon Jones, the GOAT, I think, statement is not really up for debate, at least not currently, but it's the pound for pound that's been drawing a lot of criticism, again, because people feel quite strongly that activity should be factored in to the pound for pound rankings, etc. So we're going to play a little bit more of this, and I want to give you guys my thoughts.
Numbers don't lie.
Does he have pictures of you?
That was Kevin Iole, by the way, saying, does Jon Jones have pictures of you? Basically saying, is he blackmailing Dana White, or kind of poking fun? Has he got something on you as to why you're defending him so aggressively?
Saw that on the internet too. Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid to think that Jon Jones is not the pound for pound best fighter in the world and the GOAT. But maybe you are.
He's not going to talk to any of us either, because right now,
what do you mean?
because he's watching this and we're all saying, questioning you and
Yeah, question me. Who's better than Jon Jones? Who's pound for pound better than?
no, okay, John.
At what point does
Nope.
activity come into play, right? I mean, we all agree there is nobody better than Jon Jones. He's the greatest of all time. There's no question about it. But at some point when you're looking at rankings, they do have to represent what's happening in the organization at that moment, right at that time. And in the past 3 years, he's had one fight.
And you thought he lost to Reyes.
Huh?
And when he fought Reyes, you said you thought.
So a lot of things are happening here. So we're going to stop right now. Look, this is the first time in a very long time that at one of these press conferences, we've had people challenge Dana White. Now, usually that doesn't happen, I think, because we seen what happened with Ariel Helwani back in the day. He was somebody that would challenge Dana White regularly and eventually was kind of like removed from the UFC events. I think he could come back now, but obviously that relationship's been frayed. Dana White won't talk to Ariel, etc. So it seems to be that a lot of journalists are usually asking very softball questions to Dana White. They don't have a long-standing relationship with him. They're probably intimidated by him. Kevin Iole, by the way, if you listen to the MMA Joey interview today, he's known Dana White since the 90s. He's known Dana White for a long time. Dana White, I imagine, probably has a good amount of respect for Kevin Iole. So Kevin Iole feels comfortable doing this. Now, you also heard John Morgan, there was another longtime MMA journalist, chime in as well and give his thoughts and say, hey, like, when does activity come into play? So first of all, we want to give, major thumbs up, a major, props to both Kevin Iole and John Morgan for asking these tough questions, because I'm sure it's not easy. I'm sure they're worried about losing their UFC press conference credentials. Maybe that's not even in the reality of the equation anymore. Maybe Dana White softened up in that respect or whatnot, but it was a pretty ballsy thing to do this. Now, it goes on and on. Kevin Iole, John Morgan, some of the other press conference members basically, they push back on this notion that Jon Jones is the current pound for pound greatest. And the main rationale why he shouldn't be considered the pound for pound, at least what they're saying, is because of activity, because he hasn't been active, because he's fought once in the last 3 years, as John Morgan said. He fought not too long ago, I think a year and a half ago against Cyril Gane back in March. So almost a year and a half ago. He was scheduled to fight last November. He got injured and that fight got delayed. Okay. So it's really all about activity where people are chiming in. But let's be real here. It does feel like a lot of time has passed where Jon Jones hasn't fought. But the problem is that there's no explicit criteria for pound, meaning I know Kevin Iole says a lot of times if people aren't active, meaning they don't have a scheduled fight for a year, they might be removed from the pound for pound, then they might be brought back in, etc. but there's no explicit rule. So people are getting upset over a subjective criteria. What is it? 6 months? Is it a year? Is it a year and a half? Is it 2 years? And maybe whatever subjective measure you want to put on it, it's like for most reasonable people, we passed that threshold. You could say that, but again, it's again an arbitrary decision. So I can see Dana White's perspective here, although it doesn't seem to mesh with things that he's done in other cases, right? A lot of times he knows somebody's going to be out for a year, he'll strip them of the title. It happened with Yuri Prohashka, it happened with Jamal Hill, it's happened with a lot of fighters, and it's not happening with Jon Jones, right? So you could say maybe there's a double standard here, but again, maybe Jon Jones has earned this time to retain the title because of all he's done in the sport. He's been in the UFC, I think, since 2008. We looked this up earlier in the week on the show. So maybe there's some extenuating circumstances here, and people are getting so upset about it. I don't think it's warranted because while it is some extenuating circumstances, we can understand why this is happening. Jon Jones has done tremendous things for the sport throughout his career. So I don't think it's so warranted to beat up on Dana White in the UFC so much. Yes, maybe he's getting a little bit of special treatment. We see special treatment all the time for different fighters, for Conor McGregor to name one, but for many folks, right? Now, why this is happening, that's another question. I've talked about this in another video about the Jon Jones conspiracy video. So if you want to check that out, make sure to do that. But I think it's kind of understood that the reason why Dana White is doing this and really putting himself out there to support Jon Jones over and over is this whole idea of wanting Jon Jones to retire on top, and to step away from the sport as the baddest man of all time across all combat sports, the man who could conquer anybody. And again, I go back to the notion that this really all comes down to Francis Ngannou, right? Francis Ngannou walked away as the champ. This is Dana White's definitive way to say, look, Francis isn't in the UFC, but Francis isn't the baddest man on the planet. I think that's a bit of a problem in the UFC's eyes to have the current baddest man, the baddest fighter in the world not be under the UFC roster, right? Because it's not only a really amazing fighter, it's the heavyweight champ, who usually, because the heaviest weight class is considered, if they're the champ, they're the baddest man on the planet. So I think that's a bit of a PR nightmare for the UFC, at least in their mind. In their minds, that's how they feel. So they want Jon Jones to establish his dominance, beat Stipe, somebody who previously beat Francis, and then step away with essentially a perfect record, right? Once we get that one loss potentially overturned. I think that's what this comes down to. So again, even though I don't particularly have a massive problem with where Dana White's coming from, I understand it. I do think it seems a little bit out of line with what he's done with other fighters, but I can also see the point where it may be justified just by the virtue of, hey, let's give Jon Jones a little special treatment given all he's done in the sport, every challenge he's conquered, how many people he's defeated, how many successful title defenses he's had. It's insane. You know, we look at other amazing fighters that go up, have one, like look at Leon Edwards recently. We thought he was going to have a really long title run, and then just like that, he gets beaten by Bilal Muhammad, somebody who we'd all written off. It's very hard to stay on top as long as Jon Jones has in terms of a champion, undefeated, essentially. So I don't think it's that out of line. People can say what they want to say. People can attack Dana White and troll him and make fun of him. But again, I don't think we should be as hard as hard on Dana White as we are, because this is a subjective category. There has been, maybe one day we can say, pound for pound, you are no longer in that discussion after a year of inactivity, or even if you have a fight scheduled, if you haven't fought in the last year, you got to be removed, and then you can be added back in. But that hasn't happened yet. So what are we talking about here? Coming back to the main point of this entire video, regardless of where you fall in terms of, is this okay? Is this not okay? Do you agree with Dana White or do you disagree? I think we can give massive props to Kevin Iole for pushing this conversation, which I think a lot of journalists were afraid to push. So massive props to Kevin Iole, massive props to John Morgan. It made for a really fun press conference. We haven't seen one this amazing in a really long time. And props to Dana White for staying up there. He didn't scream. He didn't leave. He didn't, cut them off. He let them have their discourse. He let them debate with him. They had a conversation back and forth. I thought it was amazing on all parts. So maybe we'll see more of this. I think this is great. Maybe even one day we'll see Ariel Helwani come back and interview Dana White. What is Dana White shouldn't have anything to worry about. They may not get along, but maybe they could have a great interview. and a great discussion, even if they don't see eye to eye. Yeah, I know nobody agrees with Dana on this. I might be the only one that is trying to understand the UFC's perspective, and I don't have a massive problem with it, but that's me personally. So anyways, that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining. I do see we have some people on. I just meant for this to be a short video. I hope people check it out after the fact. But if you guys could, who are on the stream right now, like the video, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. We'll be back tomorrow with a regularly scheduled show at 1:30 p.m. PST, and I will see you guys then. Take it easy.